Hey everyone, my name is Philip Jones, kidney transplant.
Hello, my name is Tafaro Cook, two-time kidney transplant recipient and founder of Kidney Care Coaches, where we coach people with stage 3 to stage 5 kidney disease. If you or you know someone who has kidney disease challenges and needs to be coached, hit us up at kidneycarecoaches.com.
Well, today is 2-year anniversary of a second chance, started May 1st, 2021. Very excited for this show. We've come a long way. Me and Mr. Cook have done a lot of stuff. It's time here this past year and a half. A lot of conferences, a lot of additional videos, a lot of stories we've heard over the time, and a lot of lessons we've learned as well. Some stuff we didn't know that we learned from patients. Something that we kind of starting to kind of push on doctors to really kind of to are the stories of patients. So we have a great show for you today. Terry, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Terrilyn Renella, and I am a three-time cancer thriver. I do not call myself a survivor because I am thriving since cancer. I was diagnosed in 2013. I was an extremely busy sales leader and stressed all the time, and my cancer came back three times, and the third time it came back, I almost lost my life. I ended up in ICU on a ventilator. And actually, that morning, I'd gotten up to go to work. So I was a little nutty at the time. But now I have been cancer free almost 7 years in July. So, and I help people with cancer. I thank you. I tell my story whenever I can because it's different. The way I handled cancer is different, especially when it came back a third time. And I say to people that, I work with people in the middle of their cancer journey. I work with people that are out of their cancer, but fearful cancer will come back. And I just say to people, I give hope in a situation which most of the time or much of the time feels hopeless. So I know that I was given the opportunity to go out and make a big change. And that's what I'm doing.
Awesome, awesome. Let me ask you a question, Terry. What was the first signs of the very first time you experienced, you having cancer? And let's go in deep into these symptoms that you have for the first time.
Okay. So I had parotid gland cancer, salivary gland cancer, squamous cell carcinoma. And I had a tumor. It was like an inch size on the side of my face, right by my ear, which is where your salivary gland is. And it was there for like a year, and I just didn't pay attention to it. As I told you, I was an extremely busy sales leader. I was the mother of four at that time. Still am the mother of four.
Right.
They're all grown, but they were not. They were young, and I just didn't pay attention to it. And one day I used to do a lot of hot yoga. I still do, but I was in my office because I traveled quite a bit, but I was in my office. My hair was pulled back, and my daughter walked in and saw this small tumor. And she said, "Mom, what is that?" And I said, I don't know. I'm not worrying about it. She said, "But you need to go get it checked out." Well, I did. And the ENT, ear, nose, and throat doctor said it was nothing. He could tell it was benign. Let's do a fine needle biopsy. He did the fine needle biopsy. The pathologist was in the room. And I sensed that something was wrong. And I kept saying, "Is everything okay?" And he said, "Yes, it's fine." Did a second. He came in a second time, assured me everything was fine. I did not read my pathology report, which was something I will never do again. And I took his word for it. And 2 months later, it doubled in size and
Oh,
became very, very painful. So I called him and I said, "I need to have this out." And he said, "Okay." And he scheduled the surgery. And of course, I went in thinking I was fine. And 3 days later, he called me after surgery. I spent the night in the hospital. Called me and said, "You have cancer." It was like being punched in the gut. Um, I know you guys know people who have been diagnosed with cancer. And when you hear those words, you immediately go into fear. I had just lost my brother 3 years prior to cancer. I've lost many, many people to cancer. So I immediately went into fear. And he
This is
told
a
me,
follow up. Did your brother have the same type of cancer that you had?
no, he did not. And really, I mean, one of the myths out there is that cancer is hereditary. It is not. Less than 10% of cancers are hereditary. My brother had colon cancer, and he went 100% medical, and unfortunately, he passed. But he passed 3 years before I was diagnosed. So I was in immediate fear. And the doctor said, give yourself some time. Do not Google this cancer. And those who are in the middle of a cancer journey, don't ever Google your cancer. I did, of course. Well,
Right.
I didn't in the beginning. And then the tumor came back. He said, take some time. You just had surgery, but you need to follow up with a radiation oncologist. And I said, okay. The time I took, it came back. It was very aggressive. And the
Wow.
first radiation oncologist I went into said to me, well, I said, I don't know the stage. I don't know how aggressive. He said, what do you mean you know? It's right in your report, which, by the way, I still hadn't read. He said, it's very aggressive and you need to get into treatment like right away. So unfortunately, the doctor had not been, to this day, I don't know why. I tried to talk to him. I don't know why he didn't tell me. The second time it came back, then I went and read all my reports, and the original pathology report said very concerning for squamous cell carcinoma, which is an extremely aggressive cancer.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into Farrell's question.
Sure.
Time cancer striver. Were those other two times
Right.
that you had to deal with cancer um, the same as first time? And
Yeah.
did you have the same signs, or was there different signs each time?
So the cancer, the first time was what I just described. The second time the cancer came back right away. So then, a second time I had cancer. And that time I started researching about the best treatments. I was scared. I mean, like I said, I'd lost my brother to cancer.
Yeah.
I'd watched the medical community, and I'm not against medical, believe me. But I'd watched my brother get decimated. He was a really healthy guy and decimated with chemo and radiation, and I didn't want to go down that path. So the second time it came back, I started talking to every oncologist I could. I talked to this radiation oncologist who told me how aggressive it was. I wasn't comfortable with just one opinion. I went to MD Anderson and spent a week there. Still, I talked to 5 different oncologists there. Still wasn't comfortable. Came back here, went to UC Health, and there is where I found an oncologist who removed the tumor for a second time, the second tumor. So this was the second round of cancer I'm now in. And he was a plastic surgeon and a surgical oncologist. And he said, we need to get this scheduled, and then we need you in radiation therapy after that. And so the morning that my daughter was with me, my youngest, we went in to have my surgery. The surgical oncologist came in, and we asked him how long this surgery was going to be. And of course, I'm scared. I mean, it's come back a second time. And he said 8 hours, and we both were like, 8 hours? And he said, this is a tumor in your face. I can't just go in and like rip out the tumor. And he said, oh, by the way, and I hadn't prepared for this one. He said, I need you to sign this form that if I have to take all your facial nerves, that I can. And the form basically said that I would come out of this surgery looking like I had a stroke and unable to blink my eye, my left side.
Wow.
Yeah. And both my daughter and I just started crying.
And they gave you that paper right then before you do the surgery.
Yeah.
That is crazy. You ain't even, oh my God.
No, hadn't mentioned it, hadn't said anything to me, didn't say anything about the facial nerves. I do know that it took them a long time to get me out. But I prayed a lot, and I just had to let go, right, and trust my higher power. So
Right.
obviously he saved my facial nerves. And then he put me into, and then I went into radiation. And so now I'm dealing with a different oncologist. And I'm at a big cancer center. And when they do radiation, if you know anyone who's gone through radiation, they build a net basically around the area. Well, mine fit over my head and pinned me down
Wow.
to the radiation. Yeah, that was the,
Yeah, that's man. Claustrophobic like a man.
yes, yes. So I began radiation therapy. The first time my daughter and her friend went with me, but it was 37 I was scheduled for 37 treatments. The radiation oncologist had me speaking to a dietitian, had me speaking to a speech pathologist, told me that I probably would be going on a feeding tube, but kept reassuring me that it was no big deal.
Mm.
And I went 4 days in a row, and the fifth morning, the day I was supposed to go for my fifth time, I could not lift my head off the pillow.
Oh man.
And I was crying. I'm still working. So I'm a single mom, and I'm running on fear, right?
Right.
Still working. I'm still like, so I went in. So I skipped that Friday, and I went on Monday, and she really, came down. And you can't miss a day, and this is so build up, and she really, really put me in fear, which is what oncologists do, by the way. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's not a good way to make a decision when you're sitting in fear. So I went another 4 times, and then I stopped because I knew they were overradiating me. And I found out
Right.
later that they were overradiating me.
Let me ask you a question with that. What do you think that's about when they're over radiating you, over medicating? Um, I
I think it's about money.
okay. Okay.
I found out.
Wow.
I found
Yeah.
out
The big
from.
elephant in the room just walked out. So you're right.
Oh, I will talk about it. Cancer is a $200 billion a year industry.
I think it's across the board when it comes to just being sick. We
I
see
totally
this.
agree with you, right? You guys have
We
been.
we 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 see this. Phil and I experience it ourselves, and
Yeah.
we know others that have experienced this in dramatic forms like yourself. That's all I want to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking the question, because what I later found out from a radiation technician is that major hospitals make up all their losses through radiation. So this particular hospital had 2 radiation machines going from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. Every 10 minutes, somebody's walking in. Every
That's
10
good
minutes.
information. What you just said, I didn't know that. I didn't
Mhm.
know that. Wow.
And they had old machines, and I knew that. So I stopped,
Mm.
and then I was in a fairly low stress job. I took a very high stress job because the money, and my cancer came back a third time. Now
Well,
this time I had 2 tumors to deal with.
I just got one follow up. What was the time frame from the first one to the second one to the third one? Did you have any, okay, a downtime where you can, woosah a little bit, or what was
A
the
little
time
bit.
frame?
Um, so the first diagnosis was October 2013. The cancer came back so that was the first when I was, I had no idea because he said it wasn't cancer. So then when it came back a second time, it was January of 2014. So I had no doubt. I mean, because I was recovering from pretty major surgery, the first one.
Yeah.
So that was the second time. I had surgery the second time in May of 2014. Radiation began in July, which I stopped radiation therapy. And then I took this high stress job in the October of 2014. And by January of 2015, I had not one tumor come back, but 2. Not a lot of downtime, but I wasn't taking care of myself in the way that I should have. So the third time it came back, I continued to work. and be highly stressed. Stress is the worst thing. When you're going through any disease, chronic disease, anything like we have been through, stress is absolutely the worst thing. And I believe stress causes, I know it. There's so much scientific data now that stress causes disease, especially cancer. So I kept working. The tumors kept growing. I stopped going medical. I started researching a lot of alternative, and the tumors kept getting bigger and bigger. And they started to bleed because what I was doing some ozone therapy and oxygen therapy, and the tumors were on the inside of the skin. By this time, they came to the outside.
Ooh.
And I post my pictures now. I for a long time didn't. So I had 2 different tumors, which by the time I went into my 3rd set of treatments were huge. One was the size of a small grapefruit. The other was the size of a tangerine. But I kept working. And I'd hide my hair, I'd hide, and the tumor started to bleed, and I would get them to stop. But I'm running a tech support organization. I'm out of the tech industry. I was running a tech support organization, and my reps would watch me go run through the call center, where they were seated and with paper towels with blood. I mean, it was insane. I can look back now and go, what was I doing? And one morning I got up to go to work, and I touched one of the tumors. And by this time I was depressed because I didn't realize that I was horribly anemic, and that brings on depression. So I got up to go to work. I touched one of the tumors, and I could not get it to stop bleeding. So I woke up my youngest daughter, and I said, you got to get me to the hospital. Got into the emergency room. Of course, they took me right away. The emergency room physician could not get the tumors to stop bleeding unless we were applying a tremendous amount of pressure to these tumors, and it hurt. I mean, it was very, very painful. He couldn't. And surgical tape, everybody's like, why not surgical tape, which did eventually become my best friend. Because there were multiple bleeding sites. If you could see these tumors, I got to see, these are cancer tumors. I get to see my cancer tumors. Most people don't. So they're bleeding. So he had a friend that had transferred here from Sloan Kettering. She was a surgical oncologist. He called her. She did not work at this hospital, but she came in. And she looked at everything, and she looked at me, and she said, this is serious. And she sent my kids out of the room. I had my 3 older children were there, not my youngest. And at that time they were like 22, 19, 20, 23, and 26, right? Still young as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And she sent them out of the room, and they were all crying. And she said, we got to get, let me see if I can suture. Let me see something. And she had a nurse there suctioning the blood, and I could feel the blood running down my neck or my back. And she, at one point, looked me right in the eyes and said, I am afraid you're going to bleed out right this moment. And I do know what happened, but at that point in time, for the first time in my life, I think fear went away from me, and I said, no. I have an 11-year-old. There's no way. Or I think by that time he was 13. I know. So she said, I got to get you to another hospital. We were in an older hospital. I got to get you to another hospital. It's very new. They do a surgery. It's called an embolization surgery, where they go into the groin and they put subject matter into the veins leading up to the face. And she wrapped me up very, very tightly, to the point of I was crying. I mean, it was so painful. And she said, the ambulance will be right here. Well, I had to wait for like a couple hours. And by the time they got me into the ambulance, and the technician in the back, the EMT in the back, looked at me, and he took my blood pressure, and he looked at me, and he said, oh, thank God. And I'm like, what? He said, they didn't tell you? And I said, no, tell me what? And he said, your blood pressure was about 200 over 160. I mean, it was insane. And you almost had a stroke. Or we expected you'd have a stroke. And I'm obviously so I'm being this was big stuff. I almost bled out. I almost had a stroke. So they took me to the hospital and they gave me quite a few units of blood because I was very, very anemic. And they prepared me for surgery by putting me on a ventilator. Now, they told me they were going to put me on a ventilator, but I don't remember any of this. I was pretty out of it. And I woke up in ICU and I did not know where I was. And I could hear voices around me, but I could not open my eyes. I could not move my body. I didn't know what was going on. And all I could hear was a young woman speaking on the phone. And she finally said, she was talking about a doctor having a hard time with an airway. And then she said, "Oh, I got to go. I got a bag, a lady." I'm like, is that me? Am I dead? I didn't know. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't move my body. I couldn't. And finally, I started to, because they put you on this really weird drug to put a ventilator in and for the surgery. And I started to come to, and all of a sudden, everything started to come back to me. But my hands and my legs were tied down because I'm on a ventilator. And I'm flipping out because I was at this time a very controlling person.
Yeah.
Very controlling. And of course they put some in your IV. And so I woke up and then in the morning I woke up and my kids were there and I was writing on a piece of paper, "Get this thing out of me." And they wouldn't take it out because I was the person she was talking about on the airways, the doctor, the head of ICU at the time when they were putting a ventilator in, could not get it down into my airway because my airway was crushed. And it took the surgical oncologist, who, by the way, had saved my life, to get the ventilator in. And I kept asking for the ventilator, "Please take this out." I was writing on a piece of paper, and the nurse said, "We can't." And she said, "The doctor needs, the head of ICU needs to come in and see you." And so it was quite some time. And then finally she made her rounds and she came in. It was the end of the day. So by this time I'd been on a ventilator for 24 hours. And she said, "I'm afraid to remove the ventilator. I'm afraid your airway is going to collapse because of, and I said, "Get this thing out." I know I'm going to be okay. And she really didn't want to do it. And she brought a crash team in. And she walked out of the room. My kids said she couldn't stay in the room, and of course they couldn't. And they removed the ventilator, and I was okay. So, but I still have tumors, and the embolization surgery was just a temporary situation. So the surgical oncologist who had saved my life walked in and very matter of factly said to me, "All right, now here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you strong, but we've got to hurry because we don't have a lot of time. The next time you are going to bleed out, and we're going to do surgery, and it's going to be about 15 hours, and we're going to take your cheekbone and we're going to take your jawbone, and we're going to go down into your throat, and you will most likely be on a ventilator for the rest of your life. And then there will be 7 to 8 subsequent surgeries to rebuild." And my daughter was there. I think all my kids were there. And by this time, my kids were like, "Mom, stop this alternative. Do whatever you got to do to stay alive." But we were all like, no. And I think I tell people this all the time: don't make decisions that are this vital when you're living in fear. And I obviously was in fear. But I said no to her. I said, absolutely. I saw her. I got out of ICU. I saw her a week later. She said the exact same thing to me. And I said no. And I knew I was dealing, that I had another doctor or oncologist tell me that the tumors were getting close to my main artery, my carotid artery. And at some point, if they got too close, there was absolutely nothing they'd be able to do. So I knew we were dealing with a time bomb. I knew that, but I just said no to that surgery. And I went to another major cancer hospital in the middle of the country. I saw a bunch of oncologists. I didn't Nothing was comforting, nothing, I knew I needed radiation I knew these tumors had to come down. I knew I wasn't doing chemo. There was absolutely no way I was going to go through chemo. And I wanted hypertherapy, which they heat the tumors up at the same time they're doing radiation. I knew all the things I wanted, but I wasn't going to go into a hospital where they were over radiating, So I knew what I wanted, and I started to search for it. And I went to this major cancer treatment center, and I didn't like what they said. And so now I'm at I don't know what I'm going to do point. I'm like, what am I going to do now? And I flew back to Denver, Colorado, with what now? And I was starting to get into fear.
Wow. Wow. We're gonna go to a commercial real quick, and we'll come back and answer some more questions.
Great.
Phil,
Can't hear him.
We can't hear you.
You can't hear me now?
Hear you now.
Yeah, my bad. My power went out over here. Whether I hear
Oh dear.
it, so I had to connect to it on my phone. Uh, so I was reading your bio and it says that you spent most of your time in isolation because of your pain and you going into depression. I mean, me and Mr. Cook can relate to that. Me being 29 years, any patient 30 plus years. But explain to everybody else that's watching or will watch your reasoning for being in isolation.
So as I was telling you, I had gone the third time after I came out of ICU. This is October is when I ended up in ICU on a ventilator, and then this is December of 2015. I went to a major cancer treatment center. I spent a week there. The tumors began to bleed again. I woke up one morning, my bed was just covered with blood. But this wasn't the solution for me. And as I'm coming back, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had been working with an energy healer, doing Reiki and things like that, trying to keep me uplifted. And energy healing is, by the way, very cool. I'm very, very.
I do Reiki. I have a Reiki lady. I
Oh,
love
good.
her to death.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I love my energy healer. She was in her 76 years old. She was an amazing person. So
Yeah.
she had seen my oncologist that I ended up working with on TV that morning here in Denver, Colorado. They were in my backyard, and this oncologist had pulled out of all the all the hospitals, and started his own radiation treatment center, his own surgical center, because he believed that the hospitals were not giving the right care to cancer
Mm.
patients. He had hypothermia. He believed in oxygen therapy. So I gave him a call right away and I told him, and he said, yeah, let's get in here. And I think it was 2 days after I'd flown back, and then the tumors really started to bleed. And one day I called and I said, I got to get in now. I'm scared, right? And he was somewhere around the receptionist. He said, get her in here right now, right today. And the receptionist, you've got a full day. And now he insisted. So I went into treatment with him. He did 37 external radiation treatments, hypertherapy, where they heat the tumor up.
Hmm.
And as the tumors began to shrink, my nerves began to waken up because the cancer had killed all my nerves, and the pain became excruciating. And then he did what they call brachytherapy, where they insert catheters after 37 external radiation treatments. And radiation is very, very much like chemo. It does make you really sick.
Right.
I'd lost a ton of weight. Um, and then, so after 37 treatments, they put these catheters in, and for 3 days, twice a day, they deliver high heat and radiation to the end of the catheters to get rid of the remainder of the tumors. Very, very popular in breast cancer. Well, it's less popular than it should be.
Is that
And
something what they consider the markers? Because
yeah,
yes, those are the markers, correct?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
So then he did that, and then and that's when the pain just became unbearable.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
honestly, the isolation, I was embarrassed. I was full of shame. And this all came from childhood. I lived with a lot of shame from childhood, some things that happened to me as a child. But I was just in a lot of shame. And I didn't reach out to my friends, and I wouldn't let anybody see me except for my children. I was in a lot.
I think when we act like that, it's a lot of ego. It's a lot of ego from
Yes.
past experiences.
Yes.
Um, when that comes into play, we won't even accept help. We will shut down everybody around you because of the fear of my ego won't let me be vulnerable. And that's the challenge we get. And I know you understand this because you're in the Reiki, you understand what's going on with that and stuff like that. And just like, like you said, which was, prolific to me was you were still working, trying to do all this, trying to be this superwoman, doing all these things, and it's just ego where we sometimes we can't let this ego go, and then you reflect back like, oh, that was past Terry. I did that long time ago. I did nowhere near the new me and stuff like that. And but I've seen that, I've experienced these things. I've even acted like that instead of being vulnerable, letting people in, letting people help you, being open and accepting. And that's where, just like you said something profound earlier too. You said you don't think cancer is genetic, and when you said that, I believe when it comes to all these things, and I'm talking about kidney disease and everything, I believe it's epigenetics. And you're familiar with this term.
I
I know
am.
you are. I know you're
Oh,
familiar
oh
with this.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. So epigenetics is a new term, and it's as we're seeing people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, we're seeing people like Dr. Bruce Lipton, all these people talk about these things like that. That's when we're knowing this is a higher calling, that is not just genetic. And
Exactly.
you understand where I'm coming from when I'm talking like this. A lot of people might not understand what's going on, but you understand where I'm coming from. And that's when you hit me when you said this is not genetic. And I was like, oh, Terry's on another vibe. Terry's on a higher plane right now.
I
I
do.
said Terry and I connected immediately because I was like, oh, okay.
Thank you
I
for
see
bringing
what,
that up. Because I do the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. I am cancer free today because of his work. I,
yeah,
you
I'm
know,
a big proponent of his too.
yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, I love all those people that you just mentioned,
Yeah.
and Dr. Joe's doing the research, and he's gathering the data to prove this,
Yes.
that our emotions are what are taking us down. And I knew that.
Exactly.
I was a child that was sexually assaulted. I was sexually
Mhm.
assaulted at 24 years old in my home at gunpoint. Both people said to me, if you tell anyone, I will kill you. They put a tremendous amount of fear into me, and fear of watching my brother die. My mom passed 5 weeks before my brother. I'd already lost two brothers and my dad. I'd lost all my family. The fear, the grief, all that shit, everything just broke down,
Yes.
and I
Yes.
and I developed
Yes.
cancer. So thank you for saying all that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I recognize what you was where you coming from, and I'm like, I know where she, And sometimes what happens when people are on this plane, you talk to somebody else in the plane, we recognize immediately where the other person is, and that's where, I start recognizing where you were, and just like you say, I believe your energy healing created your way to get healed right now. And you're in this area right now just because of the energy healing of
Yeah.
what you're talking about and doing. Because again, a lot of times with these hospitals, they treat things externally when it's an internal thing that's really happening. And we're starting to find out this information. And when you go back to Reiki goes back to the ancient times.
Oh,
It goes back to, over in Eastern medicine that was healing people. And a lot of people, when I'm talking like this, it's clearly over their heads. They don't even understand what's really going on when I say these things. But we have to heal internally to heal externally. That's what I would just say
yeah.
that.
Yes, and Dr. Joe talks about love,
Yep.
and I
Mhm.
started doing his work in 2017. I do believe strongly that because of this work is why cancer has not come back, and that's how I work with people. But love is really it's really about self-love, and that
Yes, it.
self-love and that love of self is taken from us when we were really young. It's beaten out
Yep.
of us.
Yep.
What I know, I have a partner who was, hurt when he was a child too, and
Mhm.
we turn to different things. It's alcoholism, it's whatever disease decides to take over.
Yes.
And the really you're exactly right. The powerful healing comes from within. It comes
Mhm.
from self-love, finding that love, and then understanding that we're all one. We're all
We're all
connected.
one.
We're all one.
Yep.
And stop treating each other like,
Yes.
we are
Yes.
so disconnected right now in our society, and that is why you're seeing such a big jump in depression and suicide and disease. Chronic diseases are at an all-time high in the United States.
I
They're
totally agree with you, especially like, when we're on that, you said yourself, you were taking these high stressful jobs, and we get on that hamster wheel
right.
where we feel like we feel like we our ego again. That's our ego. Like, oh, we got to our this. We're identifying with this job. We're identifying with I'm this person. I'm
Exactly.
this. I'm that. And when you start identifying with these outside external things, you start doing so many crazy things because you're trying to live up to this, and you're like, then when you come down to realism, you let the ego go. You go, what in the world was I thinking? Who was I
Exactly.
trying to,
You
So
transform into a totally different person. I always
correct.
say your ego is not your amigo.
That's it. That's
Lenny
it. Yes.
Lipton says that.
Yes. I always say when you ego trip, you lose your luggage. That's what I say.
I love it. I gotta remember that one.
And I mean, that's my I coined that phrase: with the ego trip, you lose your luggage.
Oh, that's
And,
beautiful.
and
I love it.
what we have to do sometimes, and this is talking a different language to people too, is we every day we have to identify what our beliefs are. What are we believing in? What's our beliefs? And question them every day when we get up in the morning, and question your beliefs on what's going on and things like that, because it will regulate who you are, and it will start bringing the ego down, and you start understanding who you are. And this goes back to a lot of I meditate every day. I do breath work, all these things like that. And you said something, another thing. 2017 was my wake up call. In
Oh,
2017 I went to this conference, and this guy and I are talking and stuff, and he goes, "Man, I want to give you a book." He goes, "I want you to walk out to my car with me, and I want to give you this book because I think you need it." And I'm sitting there like, "Okay, just give me the book." Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That was the first book he.
I'm reading that for like the third or fourth time.
Yes, I have two. I have a copy. I gave my wife a copy and
It's
everything.
not just about getting rich.
Yes, yes, it's not. It's a healing book. You know what I'm saying? It makes you think better and everything. And I keep my book with me because I'm quoting it all the time. But again, he gave me this book and I could not stop reading it. I was like, because I identified my ego in all these areas of life. And again, Terry, I believe as a community as a whole, I believe we're getting better. We're starting to see a shift. We're
Yes.
starting to see a shift where we're starting to see more people come around to this, that they know that and we're even seeing a shift in the world now
Yeah.
because people are healing from all the outside things. There were some things even when I was little. I'm going through my journey, and we are going through our journey. We all learn at different times. We are all so you can't even push your journey on somebody else. Everybody opens up at their own proper time. And
Yes.
me going through my journey, I opened up, and I remember some abuse I had when I was little. And I was like, and I had to deal with it. We have to open up, because sometimes when you open up to who you are, you have to face these things that we buried, we suppressed.
Hmm.
And if you don't open them up and heal these things that suppress us, they come in a form of cancer. They come in a form of kidney disease. Whatever you're weak at, that's where these things come at. So
Totally agree. And you mentioned vulnerability. We're just not. We're ju- this. That's not. We're not taught to be vulnerable.
right,
We're taught to protect ourselves, and we
man
do
up, all this, yeah.
we get hurt. But vulnerability is huge. The other
Yes,
thing is that I want to tell people, like, our medical system is breaking down, and
yes, it is.
Forbes just gave a new survey. They just did a survey, and they said by 2025, 47% of all healthcare workers, that includes doctors, nurses, will be leaving this industry. 47%. That's
Wow,
huge.
that's not that far away, and that's
No,
half of the workers.
exactly. And so I'm saying, why wouldn't you go internal, and why wouldn't you take care of yourself? And why would you? Let's prevent us. I mean, when I think it's like it's over 50% of Americans have one or more chronic diseases. That's just
Right,
so.
right,
Yes, I do believe on the emotions. Bring it all on.
right. And Terry, a lot of times, again, a lot of times people, they might hear what we're talking about and they don't want to do the work. You have to really do the work. And once you do the work, you start being better. But sometimes the work can be painful. You'll break down crying. You'll break down like, what, who am I? Because you will shed yourself. You know what I'm talking about. You will
Oh,
literally shed yourself. I have, sometimes recognized things and looked up in the mirror like, who am I, man? Just breaking down like, but that's, you're shedding that old person and you're becoming this new person. And
Yes.
sometimes just the crying and getting it out your system is like a purge where you feel so
Yes.
much better. You feel like you're awakened. So, the first time I did Reiki, I was a true mess. Do you hear me? I
Yeah.
came off that table, and my lady Linda said, if you didn't do this, you probably would have had a heart attack eventually, Tafaro, because you were
Well,
holding so much stuff in you about all the things you went through and everything. And I was like, man. And so there's only a couple people I could talk about, like, to you about this, because I can't talk to everybody because it's too much over their head.
right.
And I have a group of guys that we talk like this, and it's very selective group. And we all, I gave them even my Reiki lady and stuff, and we talk about our vulnerabilities and things like that. And we even have a class once a week where we get on a Zoom call and we are candid. And I'm talking about from guys who were big time sergeants in the military, all these things, but we're vulnerable and when we get on these calls, and we let that stuff go. And again, especially when it comes to men in general, we
Yes.
have to have areas where men will talk. Women talk, but men,
Okay.
we
Yes.
won't talk. We won't be vulnerable. And so my buddy started this thing with all of us, and we won't miss a day, a week, where we get on these calls and we open up. And sometimes these things, you might shed some tears, you might have some challenges, but it's renewing.
I love that. I love that.
It makes you a better
So,
person for your spouse. It makes you a better person for whatever you're doing.
It does. It does.
so, I want to ask you. You mentioned your kids. Was there
Yes.
anybody else outside your kids that was a part of your support group? Because I know we can try to stay distance away from certain people, but there's always like that one or two people that we can say, okay, that person makes me smile when I see him. It's good to see him, when I do, even if it's like once a week, every, twice a month, or whatever the case may be. Did you have that one or two people, or was it just really kind of your kids?
It was my children, and I was just still so full of shame and embarrassed and just and felt so unattractive, which I grew up with, parents who our appearances were everything,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
My
Hmm.
dad was they both were, great looking people, but they grew up in the depression. They both served in the war. Things were not talked about, tough things were not talked about, and we had to look for help. So no, I wouldn't allow anyone in. Now I will tell you the one person who really supported me as best as he could, especially financially, helped me because obviously once I came out of ICU, I did have, luckily, I did have disability because I was an executive with this company, but it wasn't a lot. Is my ex-husband, and he, to this day, we are very, very close. We've been divorced 15 years. He's remarried, but we've remained very, very close in raising the children, and he was definitely there for me, but it was really my children and my ex-husband. His name's Michael. But no, I wouldn't let anyone in. I was still way up in my ego and embarrassed, and that's what I said. I really isolated myself, which you guys know is the worst thing you can do when you're going
Yep.
through.
Hmm.
Worst thing you could
Hmm.
do.
Yep. I
Definitely,
agree.
definitely. So really my last quote, one of my last two questions is, after you went through your treatments, did you have any post symptoms? I know my stepmom just got done battling breast cancer uh, about 2 years ago, 2021, and I know she's dealing with neuropathy a lot. Did you have any issues like that after your treatment?
No, and I will say that I'm very fortunate. I know people who went through the exact same type of treatments, who lost all their teeth, who are really dealing with a lot of pain to this day. What happened after all of the radiation treatments is he put me into oxygen therapy. So I sat in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber for every day for 4 months. Now, when I came out of
Ooh.
the external radiation treatments, I had huge voids on the side of my face. They were huge open wounds, and those closed up in oxygen therapy, and it took away all the pain. Because as I had told you, I dealt with a pain that was unrelenting, and I refused to get hooked on painkillers. So I dealt
Did
with.
they use a wound vac on you?
No, they did not.
Okay, because usually when you have an open wound like that, sometimes they'll use a wound vac.
No, they didn't. But the
Okay.
but the hyperbaric that oxygen therapy, and I knew I wanted it, and unfortunately, that's when I found out from because there's always a doctor, supervising
All right.
the ward, and that's when I found out that they were over radiating me at that second place I went to for the surgery and the radiation. And this doctor said to me, I don't know why more oncologists do not send their patients in here because oxygen therapy is so,
It's
so,
amazing.
yeah. So I didn't know. And, I do have scars on the side of my face. I do have burns because I had, but I don't care. It doesn't bother me. I
Right.
don't, I don't purposely hide them. I pull my
Right.
hair back most of the time. And
Right.
they're my warrior scars.
Right. We call
Um,
casualties of war. That's what it's
yeah.
called. It's called a casualties of war.
Exactly. But when I was declared cancer free, I pretty much and I will say that these oncologists that I ended, there were three of them, and they became my partners in becoming cancer free. They were my partners, and that's I felt so like I definitely lots of divine interaction because these three oncologists would listen to me and they would say, okay, if you want to do this or you want to do that. I did lots of meditation. I changed up my diet. I did the Reiki and all the energy healing. There was a lot of things I did around the radiation to make sure that I came out better. I have all my teeth. I mean, I've lost some, but so I feel very, very blessed and very, very fortunate that I'm as healthy as I am. And I'm on it every day. I mean, we just talked about meditation every single morning, mindset. I'm always conscious of what I'm thinking. I help a lot of people. I started handing out flower bouquets to random strangers in 2017 to show the power of connection. And
Nice.
I've had some incredible stories of people breaking down in parking lots and crying. And I know there's a lot of people hurting out there. So helping people and spreading love is one of the things that I knew I needed, that I wanted and desired to do. And I do to this day. I do a lot of hot yoga. I do a lot of things to keep myself healthy. But number one is my mind,
Yes.
I think and how I feel.
Right. You said something about the hyperbaric chamber is very, very, very well. That thing works amazing. I had a friend who he played in the Super Bowl and he broke his leg, had a hairline fracture in the leg 3 weeks before the Super Bowl he was about to play in. They made it. He was in, he was playing and
Right.
they put him in the hyperbaric chamber in 3 weeks. They healed it up, and he ended up playing in the Super Bowl for having a broken leg. And
Yeah.
this thing, like you said, he literally lived in it, and he was just living in that thing. And I was like, I would talk to him and everything. I'd be like, man, how's it going? He goes, man. And this was a long time ago when it wasn't even, no one really knew about these things. And he was like,
Yeah.
you heard about this hyperbaric chamber? I was like, what is that? Man, this thing healed him up. And he went out on the field and played in the Super Bowl,
That's
and he
amazing.
was perfect. Right. So that thing
I
does
was
work like
I
that.
was a diver, so I knew about hype. I knew as a diver, but then when I started researching with cancer, there's many countries that's how they cure cancer. Because
Yeah.
what hyperbaric is doing is it's just allowing, it's giving your body the oxygen it needs, and
Oxygen.
it's right
Exactly.
to the wound,
Hmm.
right to where your body needs it. And
Yes.
one of the things we don't get enough of in today's world, you talk about breath work, is oxygen into
That's
our
right.
body. So
Right.
yes. There's so many great things out there that we just are not aware of.
Exactly. Just like I do my breath work every morning, and even when I have sinus challenges and stuff like that, once I start doing the breath work, I can
So,
even breathe better for the rest of the day and everything.
yeah,
And just like hemoglobin, what hemoglobin does is carry oxygen. So that's what we're talking about, and
yeah,
that's what the hyper the baric chamber does. It carries more oxygen to those parts of the body. And I'm gonna tell you what's crazy is even I'm a big buff with ancient history. They
Mhm.
had things like that in ancient history that they did. They had hyperbaric chambers in ancient history. Sometimes we look back like, oh, they didn't have anything. No, they had way more knowledge than what you think we had. To this day, they had it. So I
We
just wanted
have
to say
all of it within us. We've got so much
exactly.
within us. We are, Dr. Joe says we are our own pharmacy. Our
That's it.
pharmacy in us.
I agree. Totally agree. Yep. We are our own pharmacy because your body, once you get into a different state, especially the alpha state, your body will create these chemicals to start healing the body.
Exactly.
We take it for granted that you can get cut, and you see the next day you start seeing a scab on it. Well, you can heal that way also internally because the body
Yeah.
wants to heal. That's what it naturally does.
Yes. Yes. Totally agree.
Yep. Well, I don't have any more questions, Phil. Go ahead.
So my last question for you is, what made you like? What was the first thing that went through your mind in the process of deciding to become a transformational coach?
Um, I was spared. I knew I was spared. I knew I was spared to do greater things than be a sales manager or an executive. I knew that as I had said in the beginning, I knew that cancer was not a death sentence. I knew that there was a ton of people out there that needed to hear this story and many, many, many other stories. I know so many people who were diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and told by the medical community to go home and die, and they are alive and cancer free today. And one of another beautiful work out there is called a radical remission. It's a great
Mhm.
book. I bought that in 2015. I am a radical remission. They did interview me and wrote me up as a radical remission. But there's so many miracles out there, and I just knew that I was called to do this work and to help people prevent disease, and not just cancer, but definitely, I mean, cancer's touched me the most. Prevent, and while they're in the middle of a cancer journey, to help them understand that our emotions, that's what's going to get you through this cancer journey, and that's what's going to how you are going to become cancer free. It is all about your emotions and your feelings. And so I just knew that I needed to get out there and help as many people as I possibly can, because it breaks my heart every time I see somebody die from cancer. Every time, and they're young people, it just breaks my heart, and I can't live with it anymore. I just want people to understand it is not a death sentence, and it is survivable, and you can become a thriver. So that's what made me decide. And plus, my oncologist said you can never go back to your old career, which I knew. It's stressful, and so yeah.
Right. Right.
But you had mentioned I became a different person.
Yeah, we do become different people, especially when you
Yes.
go through something like that and you start learning, this it's a new way to approach your challenges is what I call it. It's a new way to approach them, and what we try to do is leave the ego behind when we approach these things.
Right.
And still, with that being said, our ego is still present and all the time. You can't kill it, but you can manage it. You're not never going to kill it, but you can control it. Let's just say that.
Well, I want to say to both of you, I'm very humbled by what you two are doing, and very grateful that you have had me on here and interviewing. I mean, I think you both are incredible. So thank you.
And thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we
We definitely appreciate you and taking the time to come on and share your story with us. This is why we do this is to get stories from patients such as yourself. Uh, to also not to just hear the stories, but to learn from the people who are telling those stories as well. Whether it's transplant, cancer, homelessness, whatever the case may be, everybody has a story. So, and everybody's story needs to be heard at some point or
Oh,
another.
it's beautiful.
So, again, thank you, Terry, for joining us. We
Thank
appreciate you.
you.
Next week on Wednesday, March 8th, we'll have the team of Dove, which is a living kidney donor uh, nonprofit for veterans, co-founder and executive president of. the organization will be on. And then March 9th, World Kidney Day, we'll have a World Kidney Day webinar with Dr. Shrika Brookins, who will be talking about a review of the advancements within the kidney community. And then also we'll have a cooking demonstration by Chef Alana Carroll right after that. So tune in both days. You're in for a treat. Again, appreciate you both for being on, and we'll see you
Thank
all
you.
next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. It was nice meeting you.
Thank you.
And nice hearing your story as well.